I'll press record and we shall get going. Okay, good evening everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope you are as excited as I am to finish Shmuel Aleph. We'll speak about it a bit. It's not really a siyum because the book of Shmuel is an entire book, but it's a half a siyum and it still feels good. So I'm excited and hopefully you are as well. Everything will be uploaded to Google Classroom. If you couldn't be here over the past 2 weeks, everything is there. The only thing still missing is chapters 4 and 5, which I hope to catch up one day, mainly for my own sake. A reminder for me to record. We are recording. The shir tonight is dedicated by Anne Weisblatt in memory of her father, Shmuel Hirsch ben Yoav, Zichrono Livracha, and Hashem should have an aliyah. And also Pearlie is dedicating the shir Leilui Nishmat, her husband, Aharon ben Ze'ev Echana. So the neshama should have an aliyah, and our learning should be Leilui Nishmat. Okay, so what is happening in this chapter in Perek Lamed Aleph? So really, this is one of the least surprising chapters in Tanakh. We were literally building up to this moment throughout the last few prakim, and no one should really be surprised about what's happening here. It's also not a very long chapter, so today's shiur might be a bit different, you'll see soon. But if we need to divide it into sections, so the first section, we hear that as a battle begins, it's not really a battle. Am Yisrael lose, Plishtim defeat the nation in battle, and we hear that Shaul's 3 sons die. As we hear of their deaths, we hear of Shaul getting injured or wounded or fearful. We'll speak about it. And he doesn't know how he will end his life. He's afraid that he would be captured, and therefore he tells his servant to kill him. His servant refuses to kill him, and therefore Shaul falls on his own sword and dies. As Shaul dies, the Plishtim fully defeat the nation and chase them away, and some of the nation runs away from their homes, and Plishtim move forward and sit in the cities that until not long ago Am Yisrael was sitting, meaning this is a very significant defeat, one that we can nearly say is unheard of until today. And after the battle ends, Plishtim arrives the next day, and they go through the battlefield to collect the loot, to collect whatever is there, and they recognize Shaul and his sons. You know, the king and his children probably have special uniform, and it's easy to recognize them. And they take the bodies of Shaul and his children, and they disgrace them in a certain way. They hang them from the fortress in Bet Shan, so everyone can see, most likely towards the direction of the Avodah Zarah house. So this is definitely an action that shows that Plishtim were victorious. The people of Yavesh Gilad from the Ever HaYarden HaMizrachi hear about this, and they are upset that Shaul is disgraced in such a way, and therefore they go in the middle of the night, they retrieve Shaul's body, and they bring him to burial, and this is how our story ends. If we'll look inside for one moment, and soon we will also look into the map as we can see it in front of us. We will see several things. Just one sec, I'm still admitting people over here. I'm sorry. Okay, and now I'll share with you the psukim, and we can see it in front of us. So we see in front of us the psukim, and we hear Uflishtim nilchamim b'Yisrael. There's a battle. Vayanusu anshe Yisrael mipnei Plishtim vayiplu chalalim be'ara Gilboa. So many people die and are slain on the mountain of Gilboa. And vayadviku Plishtim et Shaul ve'et banav. Plishtim also reach Shaul and his children, and they kill them also there. So let's look for one moment at our map and see what we know so far. So what we know is as follows. Am Yisrael arrived from this area down here before the red arrow, and they move upwards, and they were parking in Israel. Plishtim, first of all, parked in Afek, over here. This is where the saga happened, where David was sent home. And then they went upwards, and they parked in a place called Shunem. You can see it there on the top. During that night, when everyone was parked there, Shaul went and he spoke with Baalat Ha'ov, and all of that story we know until Am Yisrael lose in battle. You see the direction where they were running away. Over here, Bet She'an is where Shaul's body was hung. So all of this you can see in the map in front of you. The surprising thing when we look at this battle, and we mentioned it, but we didn't really speak about it, is why do we have a battle that is taking place over here? All of the battles between Israel and Plishtim are southern. Okay, Emek HaElah, where we had the battle of Goliath, is not far from Gush Etzion. Shimshon was with Plishtim in the area of Tzorah and Eshtaol, also not far from Bet Shemesh. The most northern combat between Am Yisrael and Plishtim is over here in Afek during the time of Shaul. There's no reason for Plishtim that live further south to arrive up here in the north, and therefore many researchers wanted to claim that the Gilboa is not the Gilboa that we know, and it's not over here. But that does not work and does not make sense, because we know where Bet She'an is and we know where the Gilboa is. And also we can see that from Yavesh Gilad to Bet She'an, this is a 15-kilometer walk. This is something that could happen throughout one night. So all of the story indicates that this battle did take place up north. So the question is, why did the battle take place over there? So what we see over here is a picture of the Middle East and the two main roads, the two main routes that crossed the Middle East during the old days. Over here, for example, on the top, you see Nineveh. Okay, this is part of Ashur, Assyria. You see Babel over here, Babylon. Okay, you see over here the cities of Lebanon. Down here, you have areas of Egypt, and the two main roads that connect Egypt with the other side, with Mesopotamia, with what we know as Assyria and Babylon, and even earlier traditions, there are two roads. There's the route of the king, Derech HaMelech, and there is Derech Hayam, the route of the sea, which is also called in Latin Via Maris. Okay, so now Derech HaMelech goes mainly through Jordan and doesn't go so much through Eretz Israel. But the other main route that a lot of the, I would say, merchandise goes through, and this time is through Eretz Israel, through this area called Derech Hayam. Derech Hayam goes next to the sea. Over here, Aza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, this is the area of Plishtim. It goes up to the area of Dor. Until today, you can see Chof Dor, a bit south of Haifa. And then it crosses the Galil towards the Kinneret, okay? And then it goes towards Syria of today and further north. Now, if we would look carefully, this area of Via Maris is a very important area during the time of Tanakh, and you can see that the main areas that it goes through in the Galil is near the city of Megiddo, and over here on this side it's Emek Yisrael. And you can see that the Derech Hayam goes from, you can see over here, I put down the description, from Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, Afek, all of these are cities of Plishtim, right? Avoiding the Yarkon River and Dor before turning east again through Megiddo and Emek Israel until it reaches Tveria and the Sea of Galilee, and then it moves outside of Eretz Israel. Kefar Nachum is also the area near the Kinneret. So this is Derech Hayam. That area around Megiddo is a very important area. Even in the early 20th century, when the General Allenby conquered in World War I parts of Israel, he was more, so I read at least, he was more proud of his victory in the Battle of Megiddo than he was in his battle on Jerusalem. Megiddo also is connected through the New Testament to the Armageddon, to the end of the world. According to certain scriptures, Gog and Magog is supposed to take place around the area of Megiddo. And this part of Eretz Israel is a very important part. How important? That even as early as in the 15th century BCE, so we are speaking about more or less the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim, give or take, okay, we read about an Egyptian king called Thutmose III, and he writes that he conquered the area around Megiddo, and that the area around Megiddo and Emek Israel belonged to Egypt, and they would grow the fields there and send the produce to Egypt. And for many years, that area around Megiddo and Emek Israel belongs to Egypt. We can see it also later on. There's a very, you could say interesting or boring, depends how you like your archaeology. There's a very important set of letters called the Letters of Amarna. These letters are all written between the years 1360 and 1332, and they're written to King Akhenaton II. I hope I pronounce his name correctly. He's also a big Egyptian king. He was a king that moved Egypt from worshipping many kings to worshipping only the king of Sun. And he had a big temple in this place called Amarna. And over there were discovered many letters that were sent to him. This is how these letters look. This is from the museum in London, I believe. And for example, in the letter which is numbered 365, this is a letter from the king of Megiddo called Bradia to the king of Egypt. And he tells him, and this is dated to around the 14th century before BCE, he says, you should know, king of Egypt, that I'm doing my part and I'm working the land, and from me you will see plenty of produce. But the other kings around me and the other people around are not doing their work. And if you will not receive the tax, it's not because of me, it's because of them. Many of these letters are just grumpy kings complaining to the king of Egypt, telling him, please help us against this. This is my fault, this is not my fault, etc. When we look in archaeological diggings, we will also see that in Bet Shean of today, what later on we'll see the Plishtim sitting there in Bet Shean, there's a big castle that is Egyptian, that is dated to that time. Meaning, most archaeological artifacts would say that this area where Shevet Issachar sat belongs to a certain degree throughout history, in and out, to Egypt. And when everything in Egypt is good, they also take power over that area, which is very fruitful and is on the Via Maris, on the route of the sea, and therefore significant. When Egypt is not so strong, other people come into place and try and grab that area. For example, in the time of Gideon, that area that belonged to the tribe of Issachar was full of Midianim. When Egypt was probably not in such a strong period, people, Midianim, moved in from the east into the land, and they captured the areas, and Issachar needed to battle them away. Megiddo was not conquered till later on. Throughout this time, Megiddo is not a Jewish city. No one managed to conquer it until later on. In the book of Yoshua, we are told that that area is still full of Knaanim, and that the tribes of Menashe and Issachar did not manage to defeat this area. And we, in the time of Shaul, give or take in the 11th century BCE. In that time, we do not have clear data that the king of Egypt is very strong or doing well. And what we can suggest that maybe happened is that during this time, both Plishtim and Am Yisrael notice that this area is up for grabs. And if this area is up for grabs, both nations are going there to battle for it. Now, it's not only who will sit in these lands, it's more than that. Because if, and this will be easier to see over here on this map, if Plishtim that rule anyway Ashdod towards Dor, this area of the sea is heavily armed by Plishtim. If they manage to cross the country and capture Emek Israel, they really break Eretz Israel to a certain degree to three pieces. The piece that is northern of them, the piece that is on the eastern side of the Jordan River, and the rest that is within the hands of Shaul. So strategically, if they conquer that area, they manage to defeat Shaul in many levels, not only today, but to weaken his kingdom to a great degree. That's also the reason why Shaul is in a great hurry to meet them there and to try and defend that area. And this is why this battle is such a key battle. Unfortunately, we know how this battle is going to end, because already in previous chapters, Shmuel told Shaul that he is going to die in battle, and Am Yisrael are going to lose this battle. One sec, I'm admitting still some people here that are going in and out. So what happens as the battle goes forward? ותכבד המלחמה אל שאול, וימצאו המורים אנשים בקשת. So the people, the archers, they find him, ויחל מאוד מהמורים. And he was, Michal will speak about it later, what exactly happened. And then Shaul tells his armor bearer, grab your sword and stab me, so the Plishtim will not kill me and will not abuse me. And he disagrees to do so. And Shaul, ויקח שאול את החרב ויפול עליה, he takes his sword, he falls on it. וירא נוסך אליו כי מת שאול, his arm bearer saw that he is dead, and he fell himself on his sword and died as well. And then we are told, וימות שאול ושלושת בניו ונוסך אליו, גם כל אנשיו ביום ההוא יחדיו. All of his close people died on that day. ויראו אנשי ישראל אשר בעבר העמק ואשר בעבר הירדן, כי נסו אנשי ישראל, so all of the people that are be'ever ha'emek ve'asher be'ever ha'yarden saw that Am Yisrael is running away. So if we'll go back to the map, when we say here be'ever ha'yarden, it doesn't mean all of the ever ha'yarden ha'mizrachi, the eastern part of the Jordan River. What it means that all of the cities that by this line were now cut off from the rest of Am Yisrael, because they were sitting further north or northeast of this line of Via Maris, of Derech Hayam, they ran away because they would be disconnected from the nation. The other thing that would happen is it's possible that everyone that lived there kind of knew that this area moves hands. And if now Plishtim are in power, they'll come and they'll take over it. And therefore, they run away. So we see very clearly that the prophecy of Shmuel comes true. The Shaul's kingdom will not last. Shaul and his sons die on the same day. Shaul does not avoid his promised ending. He does not run away. Rather, he goes towards it. And this connects us to one of the main themes of the stories of Nevi'im in general, which is to show us that the words of the Nevi'im are true, and whatever the Nevi'im say will eventually happen. So this entire chapter, one of the main reasons we are told this story is to say, you see, whatever Hashem said through Shmuel to Shaul, it came true. So now let's try and understand what exactly happened. We have a very tricky word regarding Shaul, vayachel okay, when he is afraid or he sees the archers, the pasuk says, "Vayachel meod mehamorim." He was something very much from the archers. There are two ways to understand this word. Vayachel could be from the lashon of chil, of fear. He was very fearful. He was full of fear from the archers. The other thing it could mean is like machala, like choli. Vayachel, he became ill, meaning he was injured very much from the archers. And these are two different readings that we could read. Anyway, something that is important to note is that in all of ancient hieroglyphs of Plishtim, we have a lot of them in Egypt. I didn't find good pictures, you'll forgive me. You can believe me, you don't have to. But all of early, we have a lot of traditions where a victorious king would create a hieroglyph or some kind of letter showing his victory. And in these letters or banners or hieroglyphs, usually you would have a picture of the defeated nation bringing a mincha, bringing tax to the victorious king. The Plishtim never had arrows or bows in their hand. Using bow and arrows is very unlike the Plishtim. They usually have spears. We know that they came in ships and boats. It's not a classical weapon that Plishtim used. And it is very likely that towards this battle, either Plishtim brought with them more of the nations from the area, and one of them used the archers, or Plishtim learned this art of archery and mastered it. And this created a lot of fear amongst Shaul because they did not calculate it as part of the battle. We will see later on that David will say, "Lelamed et bnei Yehuda kashat," that David will insist to teach the people of Yehuda how to shoot the arrow. In Divrei Yamim, we will also see that the people of Binyamin were very good archers, but the book of Divrei Yamim will tell us that all of Shaul's finest archers, where were they? With David. That all of his best archers left earlier and they were part of David's army and he didn't have them around. So it is possible that the archers created fear and created worry within Shaul's camp because he did not calculate them within the battle plan. The other thing that could happen is that he was hit. He was hurt many times by the archers, and because he was already injured and going to die, he decided that it's better off to die rather to fall in captivity, which is bound to happen because he's so badly injured. A lot of commentary in the Gemara and throughout the years and in the Midrash tried to deal with the question, how can Shaul kill himself? Suicide is forbidden according to the Torah. I'll just give a few answers. This is a much more complicated shiur that people can give in a much better way than me. I just collected for you a few of the answers. One of the answers says that Shaul is an exception because you are allowed to commit suicide in order to avoid being tortured. Because you are avoiding torture, you would be allowed to do so. And we can see stories in Metzadah, and we can see stories in other places that we don't see our writings criticizing the people for doing what they're doing. But it's important to know that Shaul is the first example, meaning we would learn it from here, and then we would say other people learned it from here. The other reason we would say is you are allowed to do so in order to prevent an avera, mainly a avera that is yehareg ve'al ya'avor. So if, for example, the story of Chana ve'shivat baneh, Chana and her 7 children, where they knew that they will need to worship Avodah Zarah, and then they kill themselves, and we don't see criticism against them for that. Also here we can say Shaul did not know what he will need to do, if he would need to bow down to Avodah Zarah, do things like that, so it's better to do so. Another interesting answer that the Radak brings, he says as follows: why is a person not allowed to commit suicide? Because Hashem gave you a set amount of days on this earth, and by killing yourself, you are taking off some of the days that were given to you. But because for Shaul, he was told in advance that he's going to die here, and this is his day, So for him, it's not forbidden. Of course, this is a very different answer, because according to the first two answers, there would be scenarios in which a person would be allowed to do such an action. According to this answer, unless you have a specific prophecy from a big prophet telling you that this is your day, you're not allowed to do it. This is a much more unique scenario. Another answer that was given is that you are allowed to do so in order to save many lives. There's a very famous story about an officer from the intelligence in Milchemet Yom Kippur that was taken into captivity, and he was he was told that all of Israel is destroyed, and he's the only one left, and he now needs to give information so a museum about the state of Israel could be put together, and he believed them, and he gave an enormous amount of intelligence that affected the lives of many people, unfortunately. And because of that, when someone is important and has so much information, him falling into the hands of the enemy could create a loss of many lives, and therefore you are allowed to do so to save many lives. And no one can kill you, but you can maybe do it for yourself. The last answer that we have here is that having the king of our nation disgraced and tortured in such a way as Chilul Hashem, and therefore in order to avoid a greater Chilul Hashem, you are allowed to do that, and then it would be okay. A sixth option would be that it's not allowed, and Shaul made a mistake by doing so. You can choose your answer, but I wanted to share a few of them with you. We also see here a bit of a closure of a few cycles. If you remember, the story began with Shaul. He went to look for his donkeys. He wanted to go back home, and his servant, his Na'ar, pushed him forward to go and meet the prophet. And eventually he went and met the prophet. And he was led by his Na'ar, by his servant. In the end of his days, he tries to lead his Na'ar. The Na'ar refuses, and Shaul needs to lead by example. This is maybe a bit of a closure. We spoke a bit about Shaul as a person that is undecisive, that is led by others. So in his final action, he leads and is not led. Another thing that we could see here is another closure of a cycle is the people of Yavesh Gilad. The best moment, I would say, probably of the kingdom of Shaul is Shaul going to fight against Nachash, the king of Ammon, to save the people of Yavesh Gilad. He is courageous. He gathers all the nation around him. He saves them from a big disgrace. And over here, when Shaul is disgraced, if you remember, the king of Ammon wanted to take out an eye of each one of the individuals of the people of Yavesh Gilad, and they were going to be disgraced, and Shaul saved them from that disgrace. So now, Midah keneged Midah, the people of Yavesh Gilad that were saved by Shaul, they return it, and they make sure that he is not disgraced in the same way that he saved them from being disgraced. It's interesting to notice, and this is what I'll say before we'll finish, and we'll see what we can learn from today, that if we'll move to the next chapter, Shmuel Bet Perek Aleph, we will see Vayhi Achrei Mot Shaul, after Shaul's death, and V'David Shav Me'akot Et Amalek in Tziklag. So this is referring to the previous chapter, chapter 30, Perek Lamed, of David killing Amalek, and chapter 31, where Shaul was killed. And then someone came from the Machaneh of Shaul, and he had ripped clothes, and David starts to understand what happened in the battle. This is clearly a continuation of the story. And not only that, we will see that there is a contradiction between the two stories of how it happened in Shmuel Bet Perek Aleph and Shmuel Aleph Perek Lamed Aleph. I'm saying that because we should know that this division to two Shmuels is Christian. It's mainly from the perspective of not having a book. There's 55 chapters long, so we divide it into two, but really from the Masorah perspective, there's no Shmuel 1 and 2, there's a book of Shmuel. So for example, halachically, I don't think we can do a siyum on Shmuel Aleph, but we can feel that we finished, and that is definitely good. So what should we know after today? First of all of the book of Shmuel Aleph. If you don't, go back and listen to the shiurim, but that's what we should know after today. From our chapter, we see that the story of the last few chapters comes to its known end. All the ends tie up. Shaul goes out to battle. He loses. The battles that we're preparing for a few chapters already takes place. One of the main reasons of writing the books of Nevi'im is to show us that the word of the prophets come true, and we see it in our chapter. The location of the battle can teach us about the situation in those days, and the death of Shaul is a model for a question that people ask until today. If you'll read in Trumin, if you'll read other discussions halachically about soldiers in the army, what you can and cannot do, the case of Shaul will always be brought up, and this is a binyan av for all of these things. I'll end with saying that on Wednesday, we're not moving to Shmuel Bet. We're taking a bit of a break because I think people need a change of atmosphere, and also because soon Purim and Pesach, and we won't have the same continuity. So on Wednesday, we're going to start a new series on Megillat Esther. I don't know yet exactly how I'm going to divide the chapters, but all of the chapters will be learned until Purim. It should be easier because everyone knows the story, right? So less preparation needs to go into it from your perspective, hopefully, because the chapters are known. So Mondays and Wednesday between now and Purim, we will learn all of Megillat Esther. Please tell people, have them join. If I'm preparing the shiurim, I enjoy for people to be there and enjoy them. So if you have how to spread the word and tell people, I'll appreciate it. If not, and you come, that's perfect and excellent, and nothing more than that is needed.